Have you ever felt stuck, numb, or wondering, is there more for your life? Thanks for joining me today on the Parable Podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Zapchenk, and today we're going to have a conversation with my new friend, Sara Emmerson, who shares about how just because you're a Christian, it doesn't mean hardships are out of the question.
The theme throughout has been that God has grown me in the struggle. When hardship happens, my relationship with Him flourishes. My relationship with others flourish.
Here's my conversation with Sara Emmerson. Today, you're going to meet my friend, Sara Emmerson. Sara, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
Sara, we met formally this past summer, and I would have to say, you just have a magnetic energy. Like, I wanted to talk to you, and I wanted to be your friend.
Oh, my goodness. No, I felt the same way. Definitely the same way. I was really excited to meet you. And every time we're together, I'm always thinking, I want more. I want to hang out more.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
So this is fun for me today. I looked at my calendar this morning and I was like, oh, I'm so excited I get to hang with Danielle today.
Oh, thank you. So Sara, you're passionate about so many things and really just like a champion of people. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what you are passionate about?
I am a coach. And what I love to tell people about that is I help people get unstuck. I help people level up to what's next in their life. And I love being that encourager and the dreamer that helps you do the things that you never thought were possible. And so I get to do that in many different people's lives here in the US and around the world in many different countries. And I tell people all the time that my genius is helping others figure out what theirs is and live it to the fullest.
It was coaching something that was on your radar. How did you get to coaching in your life?
That's a great question. I actually have done like a ton of different things. I worked in retail and corporate America for many years, but the through line of everything that I've done has been my heart for people and my heart for Jesus and helping people to see that they were created on purpose for a purpose. So working in retail and management, I was a creative pastor in large churches for many years and got to be the encourager and driver of the services and of the communications and all of the wonderful things that happen there. My heart is for people who have a gift and know they want to use it, but don't know exactly where, how, or the strategy to get to where they want to go. And so whether that's been in churches or in organizations, whether that is individually, my heart is to help the individual see exactly who they were created to be and then give them strategy. And then the number one thing that we all need most, but don't necessarily want until we recognize we want it, is accountability, right?
Yeah.
So the accountability is so important. And so for me, when I recognized that really the through line was people for me, no matter what I was doing, coaching just seemed to fall into my lap. And God just continued to show me different people that were doing that. I went back to school a few years ago and got my certification. For anyone that's listening that's like, well, where are you certified and what did you do? I went through Coach U. It's an incredible university for coaching if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And then I was certified through the ICF, which just means that I got a certification that I can coach in large corporations and around the world. And being in ministry and a pastor for so many years, I really wanted to branch out and go, hey, how can I impact people in the church and outside the church? How can I bring the hope of purpose, whether they recognize it's the hope of Jesus or not? How can I bring that light to as many places as possible? Yeah. So that was really the driving force.
That's so good, Sara, just to see what is that through line that you were talking about, to kind of see how that has played a role throughout your life. Do you remember your first job you ever had?
Oh my gosh, yes. It was scooping ice cream at Baskin-Robbins.
Oh.
Yeah. The other day, my son and I, he recently had surgery and he's on crutches. So we went to a yogurt shop after his physical therapy and I had to get it for him. And I did the perfect swirl. And guys, there's not a lot of times you can impress your 16-year-old. But he looked at me, he's like, wow. And I was like, yeah. And that's something you did not know I could do. You're welcome. But I loved Baskin-Robbins. It was great.
Well, tell me a little bit about your family. Who are the people that are in your life?
So I have my husband, Todd, who we have been married. It'll be 20 years this September. And my son, Lincoln, who is 16. My daughter, Lila, who is 12, going on probably 18. And my beautiful, fun, joy-loving Bernedoodle, who is 3, named Gunner. Those are the people in our household, and they keep me busy and entertained. Most days I'm entertained by them.
Oh, well, I can attest that Bernedoodle that you have is adorable. And you said that he loves you the most. So that's...
Well, he does. And my family says I love him the most. But what I like to remind them is not one of them is like waiting for me at the door and kissing my face and running after me. Not one of them follows me to every room that I go into and looks at me as though I am the most precious thing ever. And so if they would do that too, I might be just as generous to them as I am to that Bernedoodle.
Yeah. How did you meet Todd?
Oh, that's a great question. I met Todd in college. We were outside the dorms and he had just gotten there. He came a year after I did. He started school a little later because he was in ministry. He was a youth pastor and then decided to come to school at Pacific Christian College is what it was called in California then, but it's called Hope International University now. But he drove up in like a lowrider mini truck playing Ice Ice Baby as loud as possible. And I was like, who are these guys? And they asked me if I wanted to go and hang out that night. And I said, no, I've got homework, which anyone that knows me knows I probably was not doing homework. So later I was like, I apparently finished up all my homework really quickly and ended up going to a different spot than where they were going. And then they ended up being there. And he was like, hey, how's the homework going? I was like, well, it's going great. I mean, I finished it. So we started hanging out and we're friends for a really long time in school. And then it got to the point where everyone's like, oh, your boyfriend Todd. And I'm like, no, he's my friend. And then finally I got to the point where I literally sat him down and I was like, look, my friend bucket's full. I don't have any more room for any more friends. So if you want to be more than friends, we can talk about that. But I'm so sorry. I'm not taking apps for any more friends. And then we started dating.
All right.
So we dated 8 years. So that's a whole nother story. Yeah. And then we got married and we've been married 20. Yeah. So to the surprise of most people that we went to school with, I'm sure. There's people that I have roommates now that are like, I remember you guys used to break up every other day. I'm like, I know.
You know you guys are going to last when the theme of your romance is Ice Ice Baby. I mean, that's how you met.
Right. Stop, collaborate, and listen. I'm just kidding.
Word to your mother.
So, yeah.
Sara, who would have been somebody like during that time when you were in college that was really like encouraging you, kind of doing what you do with other people, like coaching you and helping you see what your capabilities were? Was anyone like that in your life?
Yeah, I would say I was really fortunate that I grew up in the church. And so there were multiple people. I remember our youth pastor, Rick, he saw gifts in me and asked me to join the worship team and help lead different things at church. And so I was a part of those ministries. And then in college, there was a pastor and his wife that asked me to intern at their church and take over the worship for the children on Sundays. So I got to be a part of their church in a real significant way for a season. And then even as I graduated college and moved on, there were some very significant people in my life. Lori Wilhite, Judd Wilhite's wife, she leads an incredible ministry out of Vegas, but she was an incredible encourager and friend and mentor to me. Nancy Beach, who is an amazing woman of God and pastor, she recently wrote a book. In fact, if any of you have not read it, you should go get Nancy Beach's latest book. But she's just an incredible woman of faith and a continued constant mentor in my life, even from 20 some years ago to now. And so God placed those people in my life to speak truth in love and to help me see in myself what I couldn't see in the moment and help me believe that there was more than I could see at that time.
So Sara, this whole podcast is about people sharing their stories, their parable stories that, what you just said, like those people that are speaking truth in life. And I hope that through your story, people hear that truth in life of Jesus in your own story, but then they can see how it's reflected back in theirs. So Sara, I'd love for you to share your parable story with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me to do this. And as I think of a parable story, honestly, like I started thinking about it and I was like, oh gosh, that feels like a big ask. I don't have a story that's equal to the Bible, right? To one of those amazing stories of God. And then God reminded me, no, each of us has a parable story that he's writing. This is a story that he's written, not that we have written. And so I'd say my parable story started at a young age. I grew up loving music and being around a lot of that. My dad was a music producer and worship leader, and so loving performing and all of that. So being in the limelight and succeeding, my personality, if any of you do Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3, wing 4. I love to succeed. I love to impress. I love to win at any and all cost. It doesn't matter how big or small the game is. If I don't think I'm going to win, I will just suddenly decide to not play. There's part of that that's like a through line for me. I was very blessed to grow up in a home that was very loving and afforded me a lot of opportunities and encouraged me to do a lot of things. So many of the hardships that my friends had to go through at young ages in different ways, and many of the people that I come in contact with now from different spaces that they had to go through, I didn't. And was very blessed to be able to have parents who believed in Jesus and who taught me those truths. And so I had this idea that if I just continued to believe in Jesus and followed his ways, then it was kind of like a genie in a bottle. Everything in life would just work out. Everything would turn out the way I wanted it to. The first time I remember it not was I was in high school and I had auditioned for Orange County Theater of the Arts or High School of the Arts. Oh my gosh, this is going to be embarrassing, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So this is hysterical, actually, Danielle. So I had practiced so hard for this, and I wanted it so bad. And I went to this vocal coach like weekly and we worked together. I had to memorize a monologue. I practiced it on my friends. Well, she thought that the best song for me to sing would be From a Distance, Bette Midler's song. Okay. But she wanted to take a little bit different spin on it. And so we worked really hard. When I got to the chorus, I was supposed to step left and right and no matter what, go into a clap.
Okay.
Right? And so I, with all of my gusto, was God is watching us and just clapped my heart out.
Yes.
And I remember looking at the judges and them looking back at me, and they weren't feeling the clap as much as I was in the moment. And so that was awkward. But I remember a few weeks later getting a letter in the mail, and all of you who are still giggling about that, I don't blame you because it was really embarrassing. But I got the letter in the mail and it said what I had suspected, which was I did not get in.
Yeah.
And I felt crushed. I thought God wanted me to do that.
Yeah.
So that was probably the first time of big disappointment, but rebounded to that. And it was the first glimpse of, hey, those other things are going to happen on a greater scale, but I didn't fully take it in. And that God's timing is perfect.
Yeah.
And that when we try to coerce it, we bring more frustration on ourselves. And so that was a theme of my story. And then we got married and I was like, well, now we're married. So obviously we need to have kids because that's the next step.
Of course. Yes.
And I need to further my career too. So I'm searching for that significance and all those different things. And we did end up getting pregnant a couple years after we got married. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm working in a church now. I feel passionate about that. I'm pregnant. Things are going well. Finally, God's favor has, all the stars have aligned and everything's going the way that he wants me to. And I'm in the good light, so to speak. And about halfway through our pregnancy, I got sick and we started going to the doctors and they found out that I had something called antiphospholipid syndrome, which essentially is when I'm pregnant, I create blood clots, and we didn't know it. They don't test you for it before you're pregnant. It's rare. But at this point, I was already 19 weeks pregnant when they found out. Yeah. So I was hospitalized. I was in the hospital for about a month. And I remember having this like deep faith that everything's going to be fine because I'm a Christian. I mean, I'm a pastor. I work at a church. My first year of marriage was not easy. We battled that. Gotten through that, and then got to this point where I was like, oh yeah, God's of course going to heal me. Of course he's going to save my little boy. And I remember opening the Bible one day as I was laying in the hospital, and never open the Bible and just point to a verse and expect it to minister to you. I believe the Holy Spirit can do that, but then sometimes you get funky stuff and you're like, I don't know if that applies. But I opened the Bible, and on this specific day, it did, and I didn't want to hear it. And it said, and Jesus was with her, and the mother mourned her child. And I shut the Bible very, very quickly, put it aside, and I remember thinking that would never happen to me. And Danielle, I think that is like the most harmful thing we can do, is to assume that bad things can't happen to us. And that's what I did. I assumed that those wouldn't happen to me. And just 2 days later, the doctor came in and said that they had done everything they could do, but they couldn't stop my little boy from being born, and he was going to be born early and he would not make it. And we went through labor and gave birth to Tate. He was 22 weeks old, and got to see him and be with him. And that was tough, really tough. People often, when I talk about the story or they hear about it, they say, oh, I could never do that. And I'm sitting there going, guys, I didn't get a choice. Yeah. I didn't think I could do it either. When you're laying in the hospital and they tell you have to, I didn't get an out. Yeah. And I didn't get an out from the struggle of the emotional pain of it. And I didn't get an out of the physical. And I didn't get an out from the spiritual wrestle either. And it took about 1.5 years of really wrestling with God, because I believed in my heart that he had really good things in store for people. Yeah. But in that moment and in that season, I wasn't sure I believed he had good things in store for me. I wanted to, but the facts at that point were not adding up to that. And I recognized that it wasn't that God was punishing me, or it wasn't that I hadn't said enough prayers, or it wasn't that I hadn't read my Bible enough or pointed to the right verse. It was that, just like it says in John, in this world, we will have trouble. I mean, it promises us that. And I hadn't let that soak in yet enough. I had let God be my savior. I let God be my father, but I hadn't really learned to allow God to be my hope giver or rescuer. Yeah. Because I hadn't really had to go to those depths yet. And so going to the depth of losing Tate was a hard one for me, and really wrestled. But as I continued to get counseling and was surrounded by incredible friends and mentors, and continued to recognize that my story wasn't done, and that God did still have good things in store for me, and that I'm not going to get all the answers here. He had to do a lot of work in that season on me. And I wish I could tell you that that was the last time. And that was the last time 20 years ago. No, actually, this May, he would have been 18. And so 2 years later, we were blessed with my son, Lincoln. He was born 2 months early. And so that was a journey with a preemie. And then my daughter Lila came, and she just beats to her own drum, and she came whenever she wanted to. So she was born at 38 weeks. But the theme throughout has been that God has grown me in the struggle. When hardship happens, my relationship with him flourishes. My relationship with others flourish. My husband and I, we are wacky in a lot of different ways, but we've recognized even through our marriage, when hardship happens, we actually thrive. Not that I want hardship to happen to us a lot, but that's a unique thing about both of us, that we can bind together to weather those storms. But yeah, it's that recognition that I have to release my will and trust that his will is good, even when it doesn't feel like it. And so my parable story is one that continues to be, even in the last 4 or 5 years, there's things that didn't go my way, things that I wanted differently, things that felt like betrayal. or just heart-wrenching things that shifted. And in that, I still can look back and go, hey, God wasn't absent in those moments. I look back at the moment in the hospital with Tate. He wasn't absent. He was actually right there next to me, but I was in such pain that I didn't have the strength to like put my hand out and hold on to his at that moment.
Yeah.
And so my story's been one of recognizing that he's there and learning to quickly, when those moments come, to quickly reach for his hand instead of curl up in the ball in my closet by myself, which, trust me, has happened way too many times. But when I reach out for his hand and I continue to take the small steps that I know I need to take each day, the parable story shifts from one of being isolated and alone and feeling forgotten or rejected to one of resilience and one of living out his story and one of bringing hope and help and encouragement and belief to others.
Sara, well, first, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing about Tate and even sharing the awkward moments of life. Bette Midler, I will always now remember you doing that.
Please, if you don't step back and forth and clap every time you hear that song, I'm going to be sorely disappointed.
I love that about you, that you share those moments where some people would just keep them hidden, but like share.
I probably should. It's probably
it.
better if I would. Hey, I'm quirky and out there and awkward, and
everybody has that.
I tried to hide it for a long time, and now I'm like, hey, this is what you get, people.
Yeah. Sara, we're very similar. I think we're very close on the Enneagram, where I do not like disappointment. I also want to win. I want to impress people. And so I try and control and make sure everything is in an agenda. It is all laid out so that I can make sure life happens the way it should. And God will be over there. And I will pray to him and I'll do my morning devotions. But at the end of the day, like, I'm going to make it happen. And so when I fail, which is often, when I fail, it is so hard. Just like what you said, it's this disappointment of like, why is this happening to me if I'm a Christian? So I appreciate you bringing in that perspective of we are going to have disappointment in our life because he is going to use that to grow and shape who we are. I guess my question for you is, in those moments, you said that God was there. You weren't angry at him, but how do you think?
I think so. I mean, I don't want to paint a picture that wasn't true. I mean, There definitely was moments of anger and frustration, but it was rooted in sadness and in a deep disappointment and disillusionment. I think that was the biggest thing for me, is I just could not believe that the things that I thought would never happen to me could happen, or that he would never do that to me, and recognizing that he didn't do it. Yeah. I believe God can use everything that we go through for his glory and for good, but I don't think God wanted my baby to die. Sin and sickness enters into this world. And so for those of you that are listening today, if you're in a season of hardship, he's not trying to zap you and hurt you, but he will be with you and he can teach you through it. But God's not a God of vengeance.
Yeah.
And so he allows us to walk through things. And I do believe there's also consequences, good and bad. This is what I get to talk with people about every day when in coaching, helping us to take that 100% responsibility to go, hey, look, in that moment, I was angry and disillusioned and frustrated. But I knew God was, I think that was the hardest part, Danielle, was it would have been easier if I didn't believe in God, because then I could just be like, this world sucks. But when I believed in him and I knew he had the power to shift it, and I didn't have the answers as to why he didn't, that's where the wrestling really came in.
How would you encourage somebody? How do we walk in God's timing rather than always relying on our own timing of our life? I mean, that is a life journey. So how do we check it on the daily? Like, how are we walking along with him?
Yeah, I'm still learning about that. And in fact, over the last few months, this last month has been a really big month for our family. And my mom had back surgery. It was spring break for the kids. My son had to have a double impingement hip surgery. So we had to fly him to another state to have this surgery. And it was a big deal. And I use that example because at the beginning of the month, I was really committed to, okay, hey, look, if I can just get all the scheduling right and make everything happen the exact way that it needs to, then I can schedule the heck out of this and we'll all be fine. Yeah. And then I took a step back and was like, hey, Sarah, that's not what you're teaching everyone else. And you know that the second one thing shifts, everything's going to shift and you're going to feel like the house of cards is falling. Yeah. So I'm reminded over and over again that the key to that, Danielle, is first rooting myself in Jesus. And the two words that come to mind and have really been a theme for me over the last month is rest and respond. All he's asking me to do is rest and respond. And if I rest in him daily and respond to the things that he's given that are right in front of me, then I have the strength that I need for that day. I am going to be on the right track. I think what happens is we try to get so far ahead. I shouldn't say we. I try to get so far ahead and figure out those things that are 10 steps, 12 steps, 15 steps ahead of me. And sometimes even talk myself out of things that would be really good for me to do right now because I've already gone so far ahead and mitigated whatever I think could happen that's never going to. And so I work out at Orange Theory, and I love what one of the coaches says all the time when we're doing hills, and I'm not a runner, so I just do whatever they tell me. But he said, whenever you're doing hills, the key is to keep your eyes forward and take smaller steps. And so I'd say the theme of rest and respond has been a huge one for me. And then the thought of like, hey, when I'm going up a heavy or hard hill in my life, all I need to do is keep my eyes forward on Jesus and take smaller steps. Sometimes that step is a nap. Sometimes that step is a walk outside with my dog. Sometimes that step is, hey, I need to say no to all the extra things. Sometimes that step last week, the step for me was I needed to say yes to go out to dinner with my two friends. And it was a crazy week. My kids were on spring break. I was like, you know what? Fend for yourselves. Dad will help you. Eat what you need to. I'm going out with my friends. And I just needed that time with them. And so figuring out what those small steps are that you need. And that's where I get so excited to walk with people each and every day, because doing that alone is hard.
Yeah, it is.
And so having people in your life like mentors or coaches, or if I didn't have my coach, that's what you said, how do I do it? Every other week I am with her and going over, okay, what are those next steps that I need to take? What are the things that I can say in a safe space that I wouldn't even admit to anybody else or anywhere else? And then how do I sift through all of that to understand what the gold or the truth is that I really need to be focused on? And then what strategy do I need to put in place to continue to take those steps of faith so that I can make it, even if it's not to the top of the hill, so that I can make it a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further.
Absolutely. I think it is critical of thinking as in next steps. It's not just like you have to figure it all out by the next day. You know, it's just one step at a time. Thank you, Orange Theory, for, giving us God moments.
And if you sign up today, no, I'm just kidding. I don't get any kickbacks from Orange Theory. I do get kicked in the butt from Orange Theory, but I don't get any kickbacks from them.
Sarah, have you noticed that by coaching other people, like you are actually growing and coaching yourself throughout that? Because there's just like these moments of like, oh, I know I've been telling people these things, but now for some reason it's just becomes a little bit clearer for yourself too every day.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The last 3 years, the internal growth, the ability to release shame. I will always care what people think because I'm human and because of who God created me to be. But the ability to let things go and to see other people's perspectives. My husband used to tell me this all the time, but now I actually understand it in a greater way through coaching. But he would always tell me, Sarah, quit worrying about that. People aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. And I'm like, you're right. They're not. And so recognizing that our actions are always linked back to our belief, to our thoughts. Every single action that you're taking is linked back to a thought. And so for me personally, to recognize how many self-limiting beliefs I had that were actually linked to self-limiting behaviors and being able to recognize them and name them. Now I can quickly name them and go, oh yeah. So my rebound of recognition for my wrongdoings is so much greater. As a coach, it does not mean you're perfect, far from it. But the being able to recognize that and having the tools, there's a tool I use with a lot of my clients called the gut check, and helping my clients and the people that I work with understand that when we start getting those thought tornadoes, you know, that one thing that you can't let go of, and you're like, this happened, and it just keeps coming back in my mind and heart. I love working with people to help them recognize, do a gut check. And what that means is this thought good? Is this thought useful? Is this thought true? And if it's not any of those things, then choose to replace the thought with something else. Choose to release the thought and figure out how you internally need to do that and how you personally can do that. That's a meaningful and useful way for you, something that's actually going to work. And that's unique to each person. So coming up with tools like that and then watching that actually work with others, but then getting to those moments and going, oh, wait, I need to do the gut check right now. This is something I need.
Sara, what do you think is like one of the biggest factors of why people feel so stuck or numb? Is it complacency? Is it because they just don't know where to go next, or they've been told that? What is one of those reasons that keep coming up over and over?
Yeah, I would say that it falls into a couple different camps. One is confidence. We often are told you're just supposed to be confident. And we think it's a feeling. Yeah. And it's not. Confidence is actually a skill. And so we think, well, I either have it or I don't. And that's not true. Confidence can actually be built, and people don't understand that. So I think some of the things when people get stuck is stuck in a lack of confidence or imposter syndrome. For a lot of people, I think another bucket that I say people get stuck in is I think people get stuck in being risk adverse. We don't recognize that taking risks is necessary for forward movement. And when we plan to take risks and we do it with strategy and they're connected to our core values, then the risk isn't as there's not as much fear attached to it, and recognizing that the risk is actually the reward. It's not the destination. People are too tied to the destination before they're willing to take the risk. So I'd say the confidence is one, that risk is another one. And then another one I often see with many of the people that I work with is many of the people are very accomplished and have a lot of dreams and a lot of goals. And they get stuck not because they don't have ability, but because they have so many ideas and so many different directions they could go that their indecision becomes a decision. And then no decision is made, and then they're stuck and they don't know which one to go towards. And so those would be the three areas that I think are most common. And often one of the tools that I use with all of my clients is helping them understand their core values. First and foremost, God created you with a set of core values. What are they? How do we use them as a filter for our lives, for our vocation, for our relationships?
Sara, if somebody wanted to talk to you and learn more, specifically if they felt like they needed to build their confidence or they feel like they are risk adverse, how can they connect with you?
SaraEmmerson.com. That's 2 M's, EMMERSON. So I'm sure you'll put that somewhere too, Danielle. Thanks. But yeah, SaraEmmerson.com, or on the socials at Sara Emmerson. Instagram is Sara Emmerson Coaching. Find me at all those spaces. On my website too, there's also a free quiz that if you're someone that you're like, I don't know anything about core values and I would like to know more about me, go on the website, take the free quiz and learn more about yourself. And then you can also sign up for a free coaching consultation there too. So sign up for a time to chat with me. I love meeting people and love learning about who they are and helping them see who they were created to be. So any of you listening, please sign up. I would love to talk with you. Love to meet you.
Well, like I said, Sara is a great listener and really challenges you and pushes you to get unstuck. So Sara, thank you so much for your parable story. I mean, it means the world that you chose to share it with me me and other people can hear it. And really, ultimately, like the goal is to hear parts of your story within ours. And so I'm grateful for you. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Before we go, can I ask you a question? Is that okay to switch it back?
Yes, I would love that. Yes.
Okay.
Please.
So, because I love learning more about people, and this isn't all about me. This is about you, Danielle, too.
Yeah.
So, Danielle, you are multifaceted in so many different ways. What would you say an area that you have been stuck in and then moved forward in? What area would that be in life? How do you define that?
I think and I probably would still be stuck in it at sometimes. I think it's just like, I love everything so much. There's, like you said, multifaceted. So if I find something that I'm good at or I like, it's hard to let go of that because is it time to move on? Like I have all of these options. I don't know if I mentioned this in one of our episodes yet. I led our women's ministry for 12 years and Sarah spoke at our last women's retreat and it was amazing. And for me, it was kind of, no one knew just yet that was kind of our last event that I was in charge of. But it was such a special moment for me because it took me probably a year to decide, like, is this time to move on? Not because I don't love it anymore, but because there are so many things a part of my life. And that was a challenge because I felt initially when I thought of doing that, I felt guilty. I felt like I was letting somebody down, letting our team down, our church, like all of these things. And I remember my husband, on the day that I decided, he's just like, well, I think that's kind of silly, Danielle. Like it's been 12 years, like you've given so much. And now I get to allow somebody else to grow in their own giftings. And that was just something that I still have to work through. But now it's a new chapter of like, what is next? And that also like that one role, like that doesn't define who I am as Danielle.
And I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to share that because that is so common. We find something that we're great at, that we've seen momentum in, that's giving us purpose and life and joy. And we want to hold on to it because the fear is, well, if I let go of that, will there be anything on the other side of that to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And recognizing that it's in the release and it was in you resting in God's purpose and promise for you and resting in, hey, if I let go of this, there's going to be something else that's coming. It's like those rope swings, right? I don't have good upper arm strength to go like Tarzan. But like when you let go of the one, trusting that next one's going to be there.
Yeah.
And it's that rest and response. And you've done that so beautifully because you're letting go of one thing and God's bringing the overflow to you. Yeah. There's a verse that I'd love to share with you and with everyone to end, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the verse is it's one of my favorite verses, and it's Romans 15:13, and it says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow by the power of the Holy Spirit." And I love this verse so much because my theme for me, for what I do, is to be the overflow. I want to be the overflow. But what this verse says is that the only thing God's asking us to do is to trust him. He's saying, put down your to-do list. It doesn't matter. You just trust me. And I'm going to fill you with the two things that you most need. Those of you that are listening today, the two things, I mean, if somebody says, hey, would you like some more joy? I'm like, yes, please. Would you like some more peace? Yeah, a double dose, please. He says that if we trust him, he's going to fill us with that joy and peace. And it's not a selfish filling. It's a filling that's overflowing to other people. And so I just see that so relevantly in your life, Danielle, that you have trusted God with that and that he's filled you with that joy and peace. And that even this podcast is a result of the overflow. So thank you for how you're overflowing just so many people's lives.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you and your words. And thank you for sharing your overflow with us as well today. Thanks for being on the podcast. Gosh, I cannot tell you how much I love Sara's audition with that Bette Midler song. It was so funny. I'm just grateful to see how she is able to encourage others. And even in the midst of her own hardships and the things that she faces on a day-to-day, she's able to continue to encourage and uplift and help people cultivate and create more in their life. To connect with Sara, simply visit daniellezapchenk.com for details. And here are 2 reflection questions to better help you reflect on what we learned today from Sara. Number 1, let's be people that don't hide our failures. I remember one time my daughter, Edie, she's just like, Mom, you never fail at anything. You're always perfect. And I was like, oh gosh, I really need to work on showcasing how I failed in my life because that happens all the time. So how can you share your own Bette Midler audition story with others this week? Number 2, take Sara's thought on rest and respond. How can you apply that to your life or maybe one of your situations that you're working through, you're walking through right now? Thank you so much for supporting the Parable Podcast. One easy way that you can help us and support us is subscribe by wherever you listen, Apple, Spotify, or even on YouTube. And thank you so much to my technical producer of a husband, Eric, for editing this podcast today. That'll do it for today. I'm so grateful that you chose to spend the time with me and Sara. Remember, your parable showcases how God grew you in the struggle. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.